Hi, Minister. Good to see you and good to have you back on the program. I appreciate you making the time.
A pleasure to be with you as always.
I wanted to start off, Minister, and get your response to the criticism levied by the Leader of the Opposition to your string of Housing Accelerator Fund announcements, including the one or similar to the one that you made today. He called it, I'm going to put the quote directly to you, a traveling circus, and said, quote, that you're paying off mayors to give federal Liberals credit for housing that was already going to be built. Your response?
I can say categorically that his assessment is false. Every home that is being funded under the Housing Accelerator Fund is incremental and additional to the projections that the cities were funding had in place before they received the Housing Accelerator Fund. Today, with a $228 million agreement with the City of Calgary, they're actually going to be increasing their housing output over the next 3 years from about 35,000 to 42,000, nearly 7,000 new additional homes as a result. I expect the Leader of the Opposition is concerned because we're making progress on the housing file, but my view is we're going to continue to do the work. There is no time to waste, and we're going to continue to partner with cities to get more homes built as quickly as possible.
Can I ask you about the scale of that progress? Because I certainly don't want to take away from the fact that you are making these announcements and that there is progress that being made now that wasn't being made, let's say, even 3 or 4 months ago. But the announcement you made today, 7,000 additional homes above and beyond what's already being planned. In total, I think you've made 8 separate announcements under the fund, which amount to about 169,000 new homes over 10 years that otherwise wouldn't have been there. I know on the face of it, that sounds like a good number, but when you contrast that with what the CMHC is needed in order to restore affordability by even just 2030 at 3.5 million additional new units above and beyond what's planned, it seems like a drop in the bucket, doesn't it?
Well, every single home that's built is going to add to the progress that we're going to make, and the more supply that's in the market, the better level of affordability that we're going to actually see benefit Canadian communities. Keep in mind, the homes that you've shared is only with the first few agreements under the Housing Accelerator Fund. We expect that there will be many, many more to come, but the Housing Accelerator Fund is only one tool in the tool belt. If you factor in the changes we've made to the GST policy, the changes that we made to the Canada Mortgage Bond to create more low-cost financing. This week, we're releasing more than $4 billion in loans to get an additional 12,000 new apartments built across the country. The sum total of these measures over the next decade is going to be hundreds of thousands of homes, and we're going to continue to advance policies that are going to continue to have a positive impact in the years ahead. And we're not going to slow down. The Housing Accelerator Fund is a major tool that's going to help us change the way cities build homes, but we have many different strategies that we're employing simultaneously to get more homes built.
Can I actually get you, Minister, to add some more specifics to when you say hundreds of thousands of homes? Because I think we're all looking ahead as well to the fall economic statement today. The Finance Minister said there will be concrete new measures in there to further increase housing supply and address housing affordability or a lack thereof. When you say the overall plan at the end of the day is going to add hundreds of thousands of homes to the supply, do you mean 100,000? Do you mean 900,000? Because against the backdrop of 3.5 million new units needed, the difference matters.
Certainly it does. So just to put a little bit of clarity, if we look at the GST policy that we've implemented in and of itself, the estimates that we're seeing go as high as 300,000 new homes over the next decade. With the changes that we've made to the Canada Mortgage Bond program, we anticipate that 30,000 homes each year. Of course, extrapolated over the course of the next decade, that would be another 300,000 homes. The Housing Accelerator Fund, though we set out a target for the next 3 years to build 100,000 additional homes as a result of these investments, we're seeing the progress be much larger when you look at the 10-year time horizon. So for example, though it may be 7,000 or just shy of 7,000 in Calgary over the next 3 years, the estimate that the city has put forward is that there will be incrementally 35,000 more homes over the next decade. There will be additional policies that we roll out as part of the fall economic statement, but we're getting closer and closer to that number that has been outlined in the CMHC supply gap report. We're going to do everything we can. We're not waiting for some magic date in the future to release all of our policies. As soon as they're ready to go, we'll be pumping them out the door.
Respectfully, though, can I ask, I take your point that you're getting closer, but you're still a ways away, even when you add in the 300 plus another 169, and in addition, whatever else you announce, let's say it's over 1 million. You're still only a third of the way there. I'm certainly not asking to be glib. I'm really trying to figure out how far the federal government's plan will actually get us in order to address the crisis as it exists right now. Do you anticipate, for example, by 2030, the full sum of the policies that you lay out will get us even halfway there?
It's difficult to say with certainty because we don't necessarily have the full policy framework rolled out. I expect that we will be able to get more than halfway there. Keep in mind that the CMHC supply gap report has identified the number of homes that we need to build to reach the level of affordability that existed in the early 2000s. We want to do everything we can to get as close as we can, but we should also recognize that right now Canada is building between 250,000 and 300,000 new housing starts every year. That's near the record pace that we enjoyed a few decades ago. But we have a long way to go, because even if we have a perfect policy framework in place, we're going to need to dramatically scale up the productive capacity of the Canadian workforce. This is going to require us to invest in training, it's going to require us to attract skilled workers from around the world, and it's going to require us to make investments that will allow us to build more homes and factories. I hesitate to put a number on it before we've seen the uptake of any new incentives that may exist to get more homes built in factories, but as we cooperate with industry and work with the organized labor movement to identify what the best opportunities are, we're going to continue to update the Canadian public in real time with an expectation of how close to that target we're going to get.
And can I ask you to be a bit more specific when you say real time? For example, when it comes to the fall economic statement, will there be additional measures in there to address production capacity or a lack thereof? And I know that you're saying you're doing this as fast as possible, and I take your point on that. But the criticism that predated the rollout of these policies was that your government did not adequately address the crisis as it existed prior to this summer, right? And that it had been around for a while. So can you be a bit more specific? And I know you're not going to tell us everything that's in the fall economic statement, but can you give us a better idea of which of the planks you've just spoken about will be more concretely, addressed in the fall economic statement next week?
Look, I don't want to reveal the specific policies that will be rolled out, obviously, in the fall economic statement before it's tabled in Parliament, but you should expect the policies that we put forward to fall into a series of very specific categories. The first is changing the math to make it easier for builders to build. The second is changing the way that cities build homes. We're also going to continue to invest in non-market housing for low-income families across Canada, and we're going to try to grow the productive capacity of the Canadian workforce. There will undoubtedly be some additional measures to help young people get into the market for the first time, and a continued effort to help some of the most vulnerable people who are dealing with situations where they don't have a roof over their head. These are the broad categories that we're going to be focused on, including in the fall economic statement, but the fall economic statement won't be the complete picture of everything that we're going to achieve in housing policy, but we are going to be sharing some updates on the measures that fall into those categories I've just enumerated a moment ago.
Just before I let you go, Minister, kind of jumping off that point, I also wanted to ask you about, I mean, you could even speak specifically of this announcement today. Last week I was covering the premiers in Halifax, and they started talking about the Housing Accelerator Fund and legislation that's in place in Quebec that requires you as a federal government to deal with the province before you deal with municipalities. They're upset at the way a lot of this is unfolding, and they're thinking about bringing in legislation themselves that puts them in a similar position as Quebec. Have you talked in the interim since last week with any of the federal, provincial governments, about the possibility of that happening and how you'll work with or around them?
I have not had a meeting with any of the provincial premiers who raised that criticism. For what it's worth, I am very clearly of the view that we can't afford to slow down. We have a tool that is proving its worth. Mayor Gondek just shared during the announcement moments ago how unwise it would be to add an additional layer of bureaucracy into a program that is actually working quickly, that is helping cities who don't have the ability to raise their own revenue the way the provincial or federal government can. We're going to continue to work with cities to get as many homes built as quickly as possible. The Housing Accelerator Fund is allowing us to incentivize systemic change that's going to have a very quick impact, but a long-term systemic reform that's going to have a lasting impact as well. We can't afford to take any tools off the table. I see no good reason to stop. I'm happy to take a call from any of my provincial counterparts should they wish to discuss how we can collaborate to get more homes built in the respective jurisdictions. In the meantime, we're going to continue to work with the most ambitious cities in Canada to get homes built as quickly as possible.
Why is it okay for Quebec to play that role as a province but not other provinces? Is it because Quebec matters more electorally?
No, Quebec actually reached out very early in the process before we were deeply engaged in conversations with cities across the country, and they made an incredible offer. They decided that they were going to match the federal investment in their own jurisdiction and put all of that money, both the federal and provincial share, towards the construction of new affordable homes. The other, and when I say affordable homes, I mean non-market homes for low-income families. In addition, the systemic reforms that the province of Quebec is implementing province-wide is as aggressive as most of the reforms that we're seeing with the very ambitious cities that have now landed agreements with the federal government. When we had a province that from the very beginning of this process decided that they were going to have amongst the most aggressive reforms in the country and put matching funds on the table, it created a scenario that didn't exist anywhere else in the country. We're going to continue to work with provinces that want to collaborate, but in the meantime, as I've indicated, when we have ambitious plans on the table from cities who want to build very quickly, we're going to take the opportunity to incentivize those kind of changes that are going to get more homes built.
Just really quickly, Minister, if another province, though, puts matching funds on the table and also wants to introduce legislation like Quebec, is that amenable to what you want to do? I mean, if they're willing to go where Quebec's willing to go, don't you have to be okay with that?
Well, one of the things that's important to understand is we are very far down the path now with cities and provinces right across the country who've made applications, and we in many instances have signed agreements with them in Kitchener and Kelowna and Halifax and Calgary and other cities across the country. We obviously have now committed those funds. We intend to use the balance of the Housing Accelerator Fund to continue to partner with additional cities. Should provincial governments change their laws, I'm sure they'll have an expectation that municipalities will follow those laws. That is not the legal landscape that we live in today, and we're going to continue to partner with cities to reach agreements to get more homes built, which is well within their rights under the existing legislative framework that exists in every province outside of Quebec and the Federation today.
Okay, Minister, I have to leave it there. I'm out of time. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Vassy.